Chapter 25 of Gray Lensman by E. Smith. Chapter 25. The last chapter. The uproar of the landing of the Tellurian contingent was over. The celebration of victory had not yet begun. Haynes had, peculiarly enough, set a definite time for a conference with Kinnison, and the two of them were in the Admiral's private office splitting a bottle of Phelan and discussing, apparently, nothing at all. "Narcotics has been yelling for you." Haynes finally got around to business. "But they don't need you to help them clean up the Zwilnick mess. They just want to have the honor of having you work with them. So I told Ellington, as diplomatically as possible, to take a swan dive off of an asteroid. Hicks wants you too, and Spencer, and Frellinghuser, and thousands of others. See that basket full of stuff? All requests for you, to be submitted to you for your consideration. I submit 'em thus into the wastebasket. You see, there's something really important." "Nix, Chief, nix. Jet back a minute, please," Kinnison implored. "Unless it's something that's got to be done right away. Give me a break, can't you? I've got a couple of things to do first. Stuff to attend to. Maybe a little flit somewhere, too. I don't know yet." "More important than patrol business," dryly. "Until it's cleared up, yes." Kinnison's face burned scarlet, and his eyes revealed the mental effort necessary for him to make that statement. "The most important thing in the universe," he finished, quietly but doggedly. "Well, of course I can't give you orders." Haynes's frown was distinct with disappointment. "Don't, Chief. That hurts. I'll be back, honest, as soon as I possibly can, and I'll do anything you want me to." "That's enough, son." Haynes stood up and grasped Kinnison's hands hard in both his own. "I know. Forgive me for taking you for this little ride, but you and Mac suffer so. You're so young, so intense, so insistent upon carrying the entire cosmos upon your shoulders. I couldn't help it. You won't have to do much of a flit." He glanced at his chronometer. "You'll find all your unfinished business in room 7295, Base Hospital." "Huh? You know, then?" shouted the overjoyed young giant. "Who doesn't?" was the Admiral's quizzical rejoinder. "There may be a few members of some backward race somewhere who do not know all about you and your red-headed sector riot, but I don't happen to know—" He was addressing empty air. Kinnison shot out of the building, and, exerting his Gray Lensman's authority, he did a thing which he had always longed boyishly to do, but which he had never before really considered doing. He whistled shrill and piercingly, and waved the lensed arm, even while he was directing a lensed thought at the driver of the fast ground car always in readiness in front of GHQ. "Base Hospital, full emergency blast," he ordered, and the Jehu obeyed. That chauffeur loved emergency stuff, and the long, low, wide racer took off with a deafening roar of unmuffled exhaust and a scream of tortured, burning rubber. "Thanks, Jack. You needn't wait." At the hospital's door, Kinnison rendered tribute to fast service and strode along a corridor. An express elevator whisked him up to the 72nd floor, and there his haste departed completely. This was nurses' quarters, he realized suddenly. He had no more business there than— Yes, he did, too. He found room 7295 and rapped upon its door. Boldly, he intended, but the resultant sound was surprisingly small. "Come in," called a clear contralto. Then, after a moment, "Come in," more sharply, but the lensman did not, could not obey the summons. She might be— Damn it all, he didn't have any business on this floor. Why hadn't he called her up or sent her a thought or something? Why didn't he think of her now? The door opened, revealing the mildly annoyed sector chief. At what she saw, her hands flew to her throat, and her eyes widened in starkly unbelieving rapture. "Kim!" she shrieked in ecstasy. "Chris, my Chris!" Kinnison whispered unsteadily, and for minutes those two uniformed minions of the Galactic Patrol stood motionless upon the room's threshold, strong young arms straining, nurse's crisp and spotless white crushed unregarded against Lensman's pliant gray. "Oh, I've missed you so terribly, my darling," Clarissa crooned. Her voice, always sweetly rich, was pure music. "You don't know the half of it, Chris. This isn't real, I don't think. It can't be. Nothing can feel this good." "You did come back to me. You really did," she lilted. "I didn't dare to hope that you could come so soon." "I had to." Kinnison drew a deep breath. "I simply couldn't stand it any longer. It'll be tough sometimes, but you were right. Half a loaf is better than no bread." "Of course it is." She released herself, partially, after the first transports of their first embrace, and eyed him shrewdly. "Tell me, Kim, did Lacey have a hand in this surprise?" He denied. "I haven't seen him for ages." "But jet back. Haines told me. Say, what'll you bet that those two old hard heads haven't been giving us the works?" "Who are old hard heads?" Haines, in person, demanded. So deeply immersed had Kinnison been in his rapturous delirium that even his sense of perception was in abeyance. And there, not 2 yards away from the entranced couple, stood the two old lensmen. The culprits sprang apart, flushing guiltily, but Haines went on imperturbably, quite as though nothing out of the ordinary had been either said or done. "We gave you 15 minutes, then came up to be sure to catch you before you flitted off to the celebration or somewhere. We have matters to discuss, important matters, but pleasant. QX, come in, all of you." As she spoke, the nurse stood aside in invitation. "You know, don't you, that it's exceedingly much contra regs for nurses to entertain visitors of the opposite sex in their rooms? 50 demerits. Most girls never get a chance at even one Gray Lensman, and here I've got 3. She giggled infectiously. "Wouldn't it be one for the book for me to get 150 black spots for this? And to have Surgeon General Lacey, Port Admiral Haines, and unattached Lensman Kimball Kinnison all heaved into the clink to boot? Boy, oh boy, ain't we got fun? Lacey's too old and I'm too moral to be affected by the wiles even of the likes of you, my dear," Haines explained equitably, as he seated himself upon the davenport, the most comfortable thing in the room. "Old? Moral? Tommy rot!" Lacey glared an "I'll see you later" look at the Admiral, then turned to the nurse. "Don't worry about that, McDougal. No penalties accrue. Regulations apply only to nurses actually in the service." "And what—" She started to blaze, but checked herself, and her tone changed instantly. "Go on. You interest me strangely, sir. I'm just going to love this." Her eyes sparkled, her voice was vibrant with unconcealed eagerness. "Told you she was quick on the uptake," Lacey gloated. "Didn't fox her for a second." "But say, listen, what's this all about, anyway?" Kinnison demanded. "Never mind, you'll learn soon enough," from Lacey. And, "Kinnison, you are urgently invited to attend a meeting of the Galactic Council tomorrow afternoon," from Haines. "Huh? What's up now?" Kinnison protested. His arm tightened about the girl's supple waist, and she snuggled closer, a trace of foreboding beginning to dim the eagerness in her eyes. "Promotion. We want to make you something. Galactic Coordinator, Director, something like that. The job hasn't been named yet. In plain language, the big shot of the second galaxy, formerly known as Ludmark's Nebula." "But Klono's brazen claws, Chief! I can't swing it. I haven't got jets enough." "You always yelp about a deficiency of jets whenever a new job is mentioned. But we notice that you usually deliver the goods. Think it over for a minute. Who else could we wish such a job as that onto?" "Warsaw," Kinnison declared without hesitation. "He's—" "Balloon juice," snorted the older man. "Well, then, he stopped. Clarissa opened her mouth, then shut it ridiculously without having uttered a word. "Go ahead, McDougal. You are an interested party, you know." "No," she shook her spectacular head. "I'm not saying a word or thinking a thought to sway his decision one way or the other. Besides, he'd have to flit around as much then as now." "Some travel involved, of course," Haines admitted. all over that galaxy, some in this one, and back and forth between the two. However, the Dauntless, or something newer, bigger, and faster, will be his private yacht, and I do not see why it is either necessary or desirable that his flits be solo." "Say, I never thought of that," Kinnison blurted. And as thoughts began to race through his mind of what he could do, with Chris beside him all the time, to straighten out the mess in the second galaxy, "Oh, Kim!" Clarissa squealed in ecstasy, squeezing his arm even tighter against her side. "Hooked," the Surgeon General chortled in triumph. "But I'd have to retire." That thought was the only thorn in Kinnison's whole wreath of roses. "I wouldn't like that." "Certainly you wouldn't," Haynes agreed. "But remember that all such assignments are conditional, subject to approval, and with a very definite cancellation agreement in case of what the lensman regards as an emergency. If a Gray Lensman has to give up his right to serve the patrol in any way he considered himself most able, they'd have to shoot us all before they could make executives out of us. And finally, I don't see how the job we're talking about can be figured as any sort of a retirement. You will be as active as you are now. Yes, more so, I think." "QX, I'll be there. I'll try it," Kinnison promised. "Now for some more news," Lacey announced. "Haynes didn't tell you this, but he has been made president of the Galactic Council. You are his first appointment. I hate to say anything good about the old scoundrel, but he has one outstanding ability. He doesn't know much or do much himself, but he certainly can pick the men who have to do the work for him." "There's something vastly more important than that." Haynes steered the acclaim away from himself. "Just a minute," Kinnison interposed. "I haven't got all this straight yet. What was that crack about active nurses a while ago?" "Why, Dr. Lacey was just intimating that I had resigned, goose," Clarissa chuckled. "I don't know a thing about it myself, but I imagine that it must have been just before this conference started. Am I right, Doctor?" she asked innocently. "Or tomorrow, or even yesterday. Any convenient time will do," Lacey blandly assented. "You see, young man, McDougal has been a mighty busy girl, and wedding preparations take time, too. Therefore, we have very reluctantly accepted her resignation." "Especially preparations take time when it's going to be such a wedding as the patrol is going to stage," Haynes volunteered. "That was what I was starting to talk about when I was so rudely interrupted." "Nix! Not in 7,000 years!" Kinnison exploded. "Cancel that right now. I won't stand for it. I'll not—" "Close the pan, young fellow," the Admiral advised him firmly. "Bridegrooms are to be seen, just barely visible, but not heard ever. A wedding is where the girls really strut their stuff. How about it, you gorgeous young menace to civilization?" "I'll say so," she exclaimed in high animation. "I'd just love it, Admiral." She broke off, aghast. Her face fell. "No, I didn't mean that, really. Kim's right. Thanks a million, just the same, but—" "But nothing," Haynes broke in. "I know what's the matter. Don't try to fib to an old campaigner, and don't be silly. I said the patrol was throwing this wedding. All of it. All you have to do is participate in the action. Got any money, Kinnison? On you, I mean?" "No," in surprise. "What would I be doing with money?" "Here's 10,000 credits, patrol funds. Take it and—" "He will not!" the nurse stormed. "No, you can't, Admiral Haynes, really. Why, a bride has got to buy her own clothes." "She's right, Haynes," Lacey announced. The Admiral stared at him in wrathful astonishment, and even the girl seemed disappointed at her easy victory. "But listen to this. As Surgeon General, etc., in recognition of the unselfish services, etc., unflinching bravery under fire, performance beyond and above requirements or reasonable expectations, etc., etc., Sector Chief Nurse Clarissa McDougal, upon the occasion of her separation from the service, is hereby granted a bonus of 10,000 credits. That goes on the record as of hour 12 today. Now, you red-headed young spitfire, if you refuse to accept that bonus, I'll cancel your resignation and put you back to work. What do you say to that?" I say QX, Dr. Lacey. Thanks a million, both of you. You're perfect darlings, and I love all two of you." The gaspingly happy girl kissed them both, then turned to her betrothed. "Let's go and walk about 10 miles, shall we, Kim? I've got to do something or I'll explode all over the place." And the tall lensman, no longer unattached, and the radiant nurse swung down the hall. Side by side, in step, heads up, laughing, a beginning symbolical indeed of the life which they were to live together. End of chapter 25. End of Gray Lensman by E. Smith. This book was performed by Phil Chenevert in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, March 2023.